and Anthony is the chair of the Strata Committee at Bridgewater Apartments, which is an apartment complex in Glebe.
Sure. Thank you, Nikki. So as Nikki said, we've an apartment building in Glebe. We've got 19 apartments built about 20 years ago, 23 years ago. It's 19 apartments over 3 levels, so fairly low rise, and then we have one large car park in the basement level that goes under the lot. We started our electrification project really 2018 with an LED project. And simply replaced our fluorescent tubes in the garage and in the fire stairs with LEDs. And that was quite amazing. We had a payback there less than 2 years with significant ongoing savings. Really from 2 aspects. One, LEDs obviously use less electricity, but they were the battens that have a sensor inbuilt in each one. So they can operate at a steady state of 10%, but then turn up when someone walks by. So quite a massive savings. And then in 2022, we started on our, I suppose earlier than that, 2020, we started on our journey for solar and heat pumps are installed in 2022. We have a common hot water system serving the 19 apartments, which we were told was top of the range when installed 20 years ago. So even the consultants that came said, look, that was a good system. The way it worked was there were 3 hot water tanks that were electric that would heat the water to a sort of a minimum temperature, and then a large gas pump system. But because of the way it had operated, and we think that some of the hot water tanks had failed, the gas pump really acted as a sort of an on-demand, sort of a massive on-demand system. So it was going almost constantly. So that really set us down that track. It took probably 2 years. We had consultants to help us. It was installed in 2022, so coming up to almost 3 years, and they've been very happy with it. We originally thought we'd get a payback over 4 years. We produced more solar than what we expected, but then used more electricity than what we thought. So now the payback is probably closer to 5 years, but still very happy. And probably the next thing for us to think about will be batteries, because it just turns out we're making a lot of electricity that we're not using. And of course, the feed-in rate now is very, very low. Speaking with Paul, we had a similar type system. So in terms of gas, we have a hot water meter. We had a hot water meter in each apartment that was owned by Jemena. That was an electronic measuring system. And effectively, it measured the flow of hot water, which Jemena would then use to determine by magic calculations how much gas you used, and then charged each resident on their gas bill for the gas used to heat that hot water. So that was the general system. An interesting story is that when we turned on our system, we were not using any gas, because there's one big main gas meter that fed the heat pump. And so once we switched over, we were not using any gas. However, for 12 months, the retailers still charged each of our residents for gas. And now we just found that sort of impossible to understand, because we weren't using any gas, but because each meter was recording hot water and water was still flowing into the apartments, they were still doing their calculations, and you can only assume just guessing how much gas we were using and still charging each resident for gas. So that really took us over 12 months to sort out. As Paul said, it's like dealing with someone for the first time. You deal with the retailers. They use the information they get from Jemena, who's the distributor. So it was difficult. The solution we came up with was we simply removed the meters. Now they're owned by Jemena. We had lots of discussions with them. We came to an arrangement where we would get our own plumber, because they were going to charge an extraordinary amount, an exorbitant amount, to come and do that work. So we got effectively permission from them to get our own plumber in. We removed each of those meters, put them in a box, and then Jemena came and picked them up. Now, what that means for us is that the owner's corporation picks up the tab for the hot water. And that was an interesting arrangement to come to, where it's sort of 80% owner occupied. So, obviously it is a benefit for tenants because there's no more hot water charges. But again, I think with the fact that we make the electricity for the heat pumps, it's a cost-effective solution. And then what we did as part of our calculations, we got all the residents to really submit to us their gas bills. So we had a really good understanding about what sort of the building as a whole was using to generate the hot water and what the building as a whole is using sort of now to generate the hot water, and a clear reduction. As I said, payback, including the solar, 5 years, and then substantial savings going forward. One other benefit we had too is just some savings in ongoing costs, because a gas heat pump, certainly for us, they're quite a mechanical thing, and then we had to get that regularly serviced. That was getting quite old, and without the service, then it would become unreliable. So with the heat pumps, no servicing required. So that's one ongoing service. And just the fact that we've got, the solar system, that's good. And then really it's a good platform then for our next project, which will be for, an EV backbone. Although before that, we are replacing our lifts, which we think actually will also save or reduce electricity because they're a more efficient system. We have hydraulic lifts going to a pure electric motor driven system, and each of those incorporates a regenerative aspect to them, so that as the lifts fall down, generates electricity. That's right. I mean, we started our project with the grant from Sydney Council, which was great because, you read a lot about it. We didn't quite know what the best system or how we could manage it. So that was great in setting us on the sort of the right path in terms of having not only a common backbone, but the way it should be metered and regulated. It's all about sort of load, not limiting, but load distribution, so we can balance the load if necessary. As I said, we have 19 apartments, 3 residents have EVs, 1 a hybrid, but it's the 3 that plug in. At the moment, we have regular 10 amp GPOs in the garage. The residents are using that. There's not a lot of load there. A little, tiny meter you plug into the power point. They just take the reading, send it to the strata agent, and then get charged accordingly. But obviously, if that goes up and we get more EVs, and so now, we're thinking about how best to do that backbone. Just in relation to the gas, now that we're not paying for hot water, that was clearly the biggest component on the electricity bill. And now the biggest component is the daily charge. So the daily charge on your gas bill, the daily charge on the gas bill is greater than the amount of gas used on the stovetop. So that would be not a significant saving because the gas bills are fairly low, but as Paul said, getting rid of, another account. Although we do have gas points on some of the balconies, so people do like gas to for their barbecues. But
sure.
some residents have gone to induction. Made me think about too, just remembering the ongoing costs as well, because one of the great things about sort of for us for electrification is just reducing some ongoing costs. I mentioned the gas heat pump, so not needing to get that serviced each quarter. And then we also had a big reduction when we did our LED replacement because we did have fluorescent tubes, so not needing at least $500, a year for an electrician to come out, change many electrical tubes that would then fail sort of regularly, and then having to dispose of them. So that was a good thing. But yes, we've got our next projects. We're looking at EV. We've got our lifts, so that'll take us a little bit of time.
Any resistance over at Bridgewater?
We certainly had lots of questions, similar about the hot water and the temperature. We also had quite a few in relation to solar. Is the technology good enough? Is it going to make the building, a bit unattractive just by the look of them? We had quite an open dialogue. We had our consultants come in, speak directly to the residents. We had lots of meetings, and then lots of work, really just on the financials as well.
Yeah.
And really got to a point where, it just made sense financially to do these projects. Yeah, I think once you start investigating, you'll quickly discover there's a couple of consultants that tend to do most of this work in the area, and it's not a huge cost. But getting the consultant in really goes through those things, Nikki, that you've suggested. They'll look at your capacity. They've got their checklists. They'll go through, what you've got, what your steady state is, and then talk about the options. So that's for us, that was a great place to start. And then once you understand the lay of the land, once you understand the options, then you can work out, is that something you want to tackle? As Paul said, just go and visit other buildings that have done it. As I said, the thing they didn't tell us was just that difficulty of dealing with, the distributors and, the metering and that bit. But in terms of starting, for us, that was a great place to start. We were a little bit slow to the party in terms of finding out what was available in terms of grants. But now we do. The council's been fantastic in that regard. But these are really worthwhile projects. As I said, not only are they sort of good to do, once you get underway and you look at the financial savings, particularly over the long term, they're really great things to do.